funding formula, and then that would go to the governor and to the legislature. So what's happened, and actually it would go to the interim education, or we call it the legislative education committee that meets it during the interim. They would get that report. So now what happens is that commission will still meet, and they'll still go through and they'll figure out what the weights and all that still needs to be, and they'll provide that report to the interim education committee that then could share it, and the governor could use it, the legislature could use it. The other part of this that's
if I could just stop, make sure I'm understanding, is that, so does that mean that the governor can have like a veto basically, or have final say over those weights?
He could, yes, okay. As could the legislature, and that part was always still there.
That was there in the initial bill?
In the initial bill, the legislature has to have the ability to make decisions. In the original bill, the governor perhaps had would get the report similar to like an economic forum, and then have to use those figures. So now it's providing some flexibility so that he could look at what's going on, and if he needs to make some adjustments, he can do that.
So it would be accurate to say that this amendment provides more flexibility to the governor to dictate the weights as it relates to the budget, so that
and we don't anticipate that he would necessarily change the weights, but the amount of money that's available and all of that is what he has to deal with when he's doing his budget. And if he wants to increase, the nice part is if you go, because it still has the bucket, and you're still going to have the transparency, all the money that's for education is going to go in one bucket, and then it filters down through the administrative, then the base, and then the weights, and then it still creates it's still creating a rainy day fund for education, and then instead of reverting to the general fund, it would go back to, if there's any after that in it and the rainy day fund is full, it would then go back into the regular budget where you would increase both the base and the weights as you go up.
And so the governor now with this amendment has a little more flexibility to adjust those weights that the water would flow through.
Yes. Okay. The reason for the commission is to look and say what the weights need to be, right? Because it might cost today. Right now, the way that the Augenblick study came back, it said that it costs twice as much to educate a special ed kid. And somebody in one of the questions in there talked about, well, there are different kinds of special ed kids. Why don't you have different weights? Augenblick was limited in the parameters that we gave them, but this commission could decide that they want different levels within that, right? Same thing with English language learners. It costs a certain amount to do that, and those costs can go up and down depending on what it costs and the tools that you need to help those kids. In the Augenblick study, it's I think it's 0.51. So 1.5 times. The free and reduced lunch kids are 1 1/3 times or whatever, 1.3.
And my last question is, so you might have to bridge the logical jump for me right now. So if the governor only has to do with how much water is in that pail that's flowing through the funding formula, right? He has to deal with how much money is going into it. Why should the governor have more flexibility to adjust the weights for these certain kids? What's the benefit for that?
Well, the governor has to. He obviously has to balance the budget, and he has to look at all the different factors. So there may be some extenuating circumstances where they need to make some adjustments as we move forward, and that's what that's providing. I would think that the governor is going to take into consideration what the commission, because the commission is made up of. These are tech people. These aren't advocates that are saying, we need to do more for education. We need more money for education. These are tech guys that are going to look and say, look, if you to make this work, you've got to have these weights, because here's how much it costs to do this, and here's how much it costs, and the transparency is the other part in all of this. We still have the transparency, so right now there's like 80 different sources of income for education, but it's hard to see where they all come in because it's just a very complicated formula that's being run on basically this spreadsheets on steroids. Right?
Yeah, definitely.